In our world, there is a category of creatures that have been spotted by a few but remain unconfirmed by science. We call these life forms Unidentified Mysterious Animals, or UMA for short. Hello, and welcome to our UMA video series. If there's one place on Earth that most likely harbors large, undiscovered species, it's undoubtedly our vast and mysterious oceans. Reports of sea monsters from around the globe are countless, from the sea serpents and giant cephalopods we've discussed before to many others. These strange, colorful stories and eyewitness accounts continuously spark human curiosity and the desire to explore. Today, I want to share another unique and unusual category of sea monster, the giant jellyfish. Giant jellyfish, as the name implies, can be understood as massive, invertebrate planktonic animals that exist beyond the scope of human understanding. The term itself is typically used to describe the largest known jellyfish species in the world, the lion's mane jellyfish, Cyanea capillata. The bell of a lion's mane can reach a diameter of about 2.5 meters, 8.2 feet, with tentacles stretching to a terrifying 36 meters, 118 feet. However, the giant jellyfish in this video are said to be several or even 10 times the size of a lion's mane. Imagine a colossal, venomous underwater creature that preys on large fish. What would such a being look like? In 1957, British science fiction author Eric Frank Russell compiled a series of anomalous phenomena into one of his few non-fiction works, a book titled Great World Mysteries. One chapter, dedicated to sea monsters, mentions a 1953 sighting by an Australian diver named Christopher Crewe, who encountered a giant sea monster while working in the South Pacific. Here is the diver's original account. A 15-foot shark had been circling me, but it didn't try to attack. I kept wondering how deep it would go. It hovered about 30 feet from me and 20 feet above. At this point, I was under a rock ledge, looking down into a fathomless chasm. It was too dangerous to descend further. As I stood there gazing into the abyss, the shark waited for my next move. Suddenly, the water became distinctly colder. As the temperature dropped at an alarming rate, I saw a dark object rising from the blackness, floating upwards very slowly. When the last rays of light touched it, I could see it was a massive, dark brown object, flat in shape with ragged edges, roughly an acre in size. It pulsed slowly, and though I saw no limbs or eyes, I knew it was alive. This terrifying shadow kept moving. By the time it floated past my level, the cold had become intense. Whether from the water temperature or my own fear, I don't know. The shark was suspended motionless. As I watched, mesmerized, the brown behemoth approached the shark and its upper surface made contact. The shark immediately convulsed and trembled, then was drawn into the monster's body without any resistance. I stood frozen, not daring to move. The brown object then sank back into the abyss as slowly as it had risen, disappearing into the darkness. The water temperature gradually returned to normal. Heaven knows what that thing was, but I have no doubt it came from the primordial ooze, thousands of fathoms below. In 1968, a diver with a Chilean hydrographic expedition described a similar encounter. In 1969, Soviet writers and chemists Mikhail Yemtsev and Arame Parnov met with an eyewitness in France. They interviewed him and detailed the account in their book, The Three Whales. As the story is told in the first person, I'll summarize the key points here. The witness was part of a 7-person team aboard the research vessel Stargazer, heading to the Inagua Islands in the Bahamas. Their mission was to study the effects of isotopic composition in different waters on animal metabolism. When they dived to a considerable depth, a leopard shark, followed by a hammerhead shark and a school of fleeing fish, swam slowly towards them. And then it happened. In the witness's own words, "It all happened in a matter of seconds. I didn't even have time to warn the team of the impending danger over the intercom. I saw it, a massive brown object with dark blue edges, like a jellyfish, slowly ascending from the deep. It was like a filthy, impenetrable film that blotted out all the blue, an endless shadow that covered everything. I fear my initial size estimate was wrong. It was clearly over a square kilometer. The trembling, gelatinous body shimmered with bubbles. Its edges, like the bizarre fins of a giant flounder, swayed gently. It rose from the abyss like a silent, terrifying phantom. I knew what was happening. I saw everything, but my body was frozen, just like my surroundings. The sharks were also motionless. The brown mass suddenly stopped, suspended above the sharks at the bottom. Then, as if an electric current shot through everything, all the fish contorted, spasmed, and began to sink slowly into the bubbling mass, like sugar cubes dissolving in jelly. At this point, the witness was overwhelmed by an indescribable fear. He said he couldn't lift a finger. His vision went black, his heart beat erratically, and his body became unresponsive. He buckled and began to sink into the abyss. When he woke up in a Moscow hospital, 2 months had passed. He had been in a coma. His team leader, Zhenya, told him that a member of the rescue team, Modest, had caught up with him after he had fallen about 10 meters. His teeth were clenched on his mouthpiece, and his convulsions had made it impossible to breathe. The rescuers, including the team leader, all saw the giant brown monster. It slowly descended into the crevice, taking the paralyzed fish with it. After the diver was brought back to the ship, the captain decided to attack the creature with explosives, but the bombs failed to cause significant damage. The tear in its body from the explosion slowly closed, leaving only dead fish scattered on the surface. In 1974, American paranormal investigator Richard Winner, in his book The Devil's Triangle, recorded an event from November 1969. While filming underwater for a General Electric marine research project, about 14 miles south of the Bimini Islands at a depth of 30-40 feet, he saw something that puzzled him for years. It was late afternoon, and the dim light filtering through the water's surface appeared distorted. He had just finished filming the movement of an instrument buoy and used his last roll of film. Suddenly, his safety diver, Pat Boatwright, grabbed his shoulder and pointed down. What he saw next was a colossal deep-sea giant. In his words, "I saw a shocking sight. I can't say how deep it was or how large. It might have been about 100 feet below us, or maybe 150 feet. I can only estimate its size, perhaps 100 feet wide, maybe 75, but definitely no less than 50 feet in diameter. It was a perfect deep purple circle, slowly moving towards us. Its edges were pink and undulated slowly, but the water current didn't change. As we began to ascend, it stopped rising and then slowly descended, returning to the dark depths. We watched in awe until it disappeared. For a long time, they couldn't identify what kind of creature it was. Pat speculated it was a giant squid. It wasn't until one day, when Richard Winner saw a group of jellyfish in the Marshall Islands, that he realized the massive creature he had encountered moved and behaved exactly like a jellyfish. He was later interviewed by American cryptozoologist Gary Mangiacopra about the incident, which led to a sketch of the creature. Moving into the 21st century, Russian journalist and author Vladislav Velinov, in his 2010 book Secrets of the Four Oceans, compiled a series of giant invertebrate sightings, including the ones mentioned above. He noted that in May 1990, Russian newspapers were filled with reports of mass marine animal deaths. Environmentalists attributed this to a concealed submarine accident or a foreign military dumping chemical agents into the sea. Biologists from the Leningrad Hydrometeorological Institute conducted independent examinations of the carcasses and concluded that the deaths were caused by a kind of biological toxin. At the time, Russia had no chemical industry capable of producing such a toxin. Soon after, in 1991 and 1992, similar mass deaths of fish and marine life occurred in many parts of the world, including the coasts of Canada, North Carolina in the US, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Sea of Japan. Scientists ultimately attributed these events to an undiscovered marine organism. Although I couldn't find the original reports or expert papers from that time, perhaps due to searching the wrong Russian archives or strict archiving standards, if researchers did reach such a conclusion, I personally find it unconvincing to blame an unknown, globally destructive creature, especially given humanity's own destructive impact on the oceans in recent years. Vladislav Velenov's book also records a 2005 French media report. It mentioned that a French diver, Henri Estier, was contracted by a Thai company to work in the Gulf of Thailand. One day, he and his partner descended in a special protective cage to a depth of about 80 meters. They stopped when they saw a large school of fish. It was then they noticed a strange phenomenon. From the abyss below, a bizarrely large brown object was slowly rising towards the fish. When it was about 10-15 meters away from the school, the fish began to act strangely. Individuals would suddenly stiffen, turn on their sides, and sink slowly into the brown mass. Soon, all the surrounding fish met the same fate. Henri's partner, against his advice, decided to swim down for a closer look. After 15 minutes, he had not returned. Henri immediately sounded the alarm. When rescuers reached their position, they found nothing. The brown behemoth had sunk back into the deep sea, and they never found the diver's body. These are the main eyewitness reports concerning giant jellyfish. In truth, scholars are divided on whether the creatures seen in these accounts were actually jellyfish. Paul Willis, editor of the International Fortean Organization Journal, analyzed Christopher Crewe's 1953 sighting in a 1972 issue. He argued that while the event is dated 1953, the account we have today is an abridged version of Russell's original text, making many details impossible to verify. However, he believed the incident couldn't be dismissed as entirely fictional, as the creature described sounds like a giant individual of a deep-sea umbrella octopus. Cryptozoologist Gary Mangiacopra, mentioned earlier, stated in his work that the existence of a giant jellyfish near Bermuda is plausible. He believes that although an organism's size is limited by various factors, based on known jellyfish species, it is theoretically possible for larger, undiscovered types to exist. Cryptozoologist Dr. Carl Schucker suggested that the diver's failure to see tentacles doesn't rule out a cnidarian, the phylum that includes jellyfish, as some species, particularly deep-sea ones, lack them. The sudden paralysis of the sharks could be explained by the venomous nematocysts, stinging cells, of a giant jellyfish. He specifically mentioned a similar species, the Stygiomedusa gigantea. This is a very rare, large jellyfish belonging to the family Ulmaridae. It has been found in the cold waters of the Pacific, North Atlantic, and around Antarctica. Its bell is wide and thin, with the largest known specimen reaching about 1 meter in diameter. The surface of its bell is covered with numerous nematocysts and cilia. Unlike common moon jellyfish, species of Stygiomedusa have no tentacles. They typically use their expansive bell to envelop their prey and then kill it with their stinging cells. This creature usually lives in the dimly lit mesopelagic zone, at depths of 500 to 1,800 meters. In terms of morphology and behavior, the giant jellyfish in the sightings, aside from the size difference, do seem remarkably similar to Stygiomedusa. Speaking of cnidarians, cryptozoologist Chad Arment, in a 2000 issue of the North American Biofortean Review, mentioned a report from an internet news group. The poster recounted the story of his late friend, George Hay, who worked as an underwater welder for Gulf Oil in the 1970s. While working on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, Hay saw a giant invertebrate he couldn't describe. To this creature, a human was like an ant. It was the first and last time he ever saw such a thing. Terrified, he took the first helicopter back to shore and never went near the sea again. Hay described the creature's color and texture as being like a sea anemone, and its shape as resembling a starfish or a hydra. This incident paints a picture of another unknown giant cnidarian besides jellyfish. Considering all the available information, I believe the credibility of the giant jellyfish sightings is questionable, but the possibility of their existence remains. First, the origins of all the sightings seem unclear. I couldn't find any original reports or detailed records of the interviewers. Key sources are missing, such as the original manuscript for the 1953 account, the identities of the main individuals in the 1968 incident, and the newspaper archives mentioned in the 2010 book. All these events feel like retellings of a legend, hearing a story from someone who heard it from someone else. Of course, this might be due to my own limitations or information gaps caused by historical issues, but I still feel crucial, credible elements are missing. However, I say such a creature might exist because I believe jellyfish as a group are incredibly adaptable. They are found in nearly every part of the globe and at all depths. The ecological behaviors of some species are simply amazing. For example, species of the genus Turritopsis, the immortal jellyfish, can theoretically achieve biological immortality by reverting between their polyp and medusa stages, assuming they avoid external threats. Furthermore, jellyfish are among the oldest multicellular animals on Earth. Modern research suggests these creatures appeared as far back as 700 million years ago, or even earlier during the Cryogenian period. With such an ancient evolutionary history, astonishing biological attributes, and the sheer vastness of the ocean, it's reasonable to believe that some giant species of jellyfish might live in the abysses we have yet to explore. Of course, this is just my personal speculation, but I also believe that as human civilization continues to advance, we will one day overcome the difficulties and risks of deep-sea exploration and truly unveil the most mysterious places on our planet. Finally, as always, the unknown will forever be greater than the known, and that is the charm of the Yuma. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.